Today's video is sponsored by Art of the Trek, trip planning software for your next hike. Thanks for joining me, guys. And the number one reason I think people don't start backpacking is that they don't believe that they can. They run into what I call the I can'ts. I can't do it because I'm not healthy enough. I can't do it because I don't know what I'm doing. I just can't. And that, believe it or not, is the biggest hurdle. Those of you guys who are experienced backpackers may think to yourself, really? Is that why a lot of people don't start? But think back to your early days and what that was like. When you didn't know anything, you were afraid of doing the wrong thing and hurting yourself. And that hurdle of you can't do it is probably the biggest one. So the first thing I'd say if you're getting into backpacking and want to start is believe that you can. Because I always say, if I can do it, anyone can do this. The next thing to do, I think that'd be super helpful, is if you can find a group of friends or a group of like-minded individuals who can kind of get you started, that is definitely the optimal way to go. Be it through, I know a lot of people use meetup.com or backpacking clubs or even in Facebook groups, but of course with everything, you have to be careful in terms of who you're meeting. Best case scenario is that you have a friend who's also interested in backpacking and you can kind of do it together. I find that social aspect, or getting into a hobby together with a friend, is something that's really overlooked. It becomes a lot more helpful when you have someone to bounce ideas off of, and you can check yourself and be like, hey, is this right? Am I going the right direction? Is this gear something that you've researched and found works well for you? And so that's really, I think, a phenomenal way to get into backpacking. That's not to say that you should be afraid. If you don't find anyone, or you don't have anyone who is getting into backpacking at the same time as you are, don't be afraid to do it yourself. It may be something where you have to kind of push through it and realize, okay, it's just me. And that's where my third point comes into play, where you have to research. And you have a whole host of options available where you get your information. Just make sure that you get your information from a fairly reliable source. I'd say YouTube is a great place to get information and input from, but you should definitely, I always say trust but verify. So if you hear information from one source, don't take that as just the gospel. That's just the only thing that you guys should be doing, and you shouldn't do anything else. You should definitely check and verify that with other sources. I use Reddit as well, depending on the subreddit. I use online forums, Facebook groups. There's so many hyper specialized groups now for pretty much anything online that it's made research really easy for people now getting into the space. One big tip for this is that in terms of posting, post half as much as you read. And so when I'm getting into a space or trying to figure out gear or backpacking in general, I make sure I read a lot and soak up a lot of different viewpoints and perspectives, because that's the only way you're going to figure out what works for you. And so I soak that all up and then be able to kind of sift through it and decide what works for me. You've been watching YouTube for a while or researching, and you are just so gear focused. And that's one of the big danger when you first start, is that you just get this blinders on and you think to yourself, this gear is the only gear that'll work for this. This is what I really need. And you start not to enjoy yourself as much because you're focusing on gear. Don't lose focus on what you're trying to do. You're trying to get started backpacking, hiking. It's something that's potentially new for you. Gear is important, yes, but don't let it take away from the overall experience. You're there to enjoy a trip, a new hobby. Don't focus on what I call the minutia. Start small. This cannot be overstated. When I first started backpacking, I started testing gear, and I still test gear in my backyard. That's what I mean. You don't go and test gear or go on your first trip out in the middle of nowhere for 4 days. It's a good idea to test gear in local parks, your backyard. I still do that for testing gear before I trust my life to it out in the middle of nowhere. And so that's something that's really important. So don't be afraid to start small. It may be something where you're afraid if someone's going to laugh at you for camping out in your backyard, but that's the safest place to test. And lots of people I know do it. So don't be afraid to do that. So like I mentioned before, this video is sponsored by Art of the Trek, and I've been involved with feedback with Art of the Trek. They've been a fantastic company. I've been working with them on making sure that they kind of get their trip planning software to where it needs to be. And so you guys come into play in this because they know that you guys are avid hikers and backpackers, and you are across the country and you have different areas that you want them to focus on. So if you look in the description, there's a link. It's artofthetrek.com/prioritize me. And this is your way of getting on the ground floor, making sure that areas that are your general haunts that you think are important, that you want them to focus on, this is your chance to make sure that they focus on it. I've already been involved with them in making sure Red River Gorge is on there, some of the areas of the East Coast, the Smokies is looking fantastic. Of course, this is still in the early stages. They're just putting trailheads in right now, campsites, lots of great information and detail, and they kind of want to hear from you guys to see what areas you think are important for them to be focusing on. They have really been great to work with. I've been talking to them at length, and I'm excited by the project and what it could mean. I'm hoping that this is becoming my primary planning tool, my all-in-one, where I can get information about, water sources. I can get information about trailhead names, how long it will take me to navigate certain sections of the Smokies, for example. And I hope you guys find this helpful as well. Thanks so much to Art of the Trek for sponsoring this video. It's always great when I can get companies that relate to the outdoors to sponsor my typical content so I can talk to you guys more about backpacking. And one of the things I want to share is just my personal experience about how I got into backpacking. This started for me a journey that was about 3 years ago now. And it started because I lost a lot of weight. And I think that's a lot of people's story when we talk about backpacking and people who are in the space. There are a lot of people who've done that, kind of made healthier choices and decisions. And so I actually, one thing I've struggled with and still continue to struggle with is maintaining weight. And I think at my highest, I was about 260 pounds, and now I'm about 225. So that gives you an indication where I've come from. And so when I shared my first point, this is something that you can do, and I never thought I'd be doing. I'm being completely serious. This is something I never thought I would do. And so I actually got into backpacking first of all because I thought, okay, this would be a cool way for me to exercise. It's a great way for me to kind of get involved in a healthy activity, and I'm outdoors. I mean, what could be better than that? And so Subaru Josh, most of you guys know him. His link is up in the cards right now. We were actually acquaintances. We kind of had met through a mutual friend, and we're in this city or this town, and a bunch of us mutual friends were getting together and we're going to go hiking in Hocking Hills. And I thought, you know what, it's January, but it's supposed to be, I'll just make sure I bundle myself up and I'll be fairly warm, and it'll be a good way to get some exercise outside that day. And it's funny because everyone else, you know how it is for backpacking trips, everyone else kind of falls through. And it was me and Subaru Josh, and at that time we really weren't very good friends. We were just acquaintances, like I mentioned. And he said, "You still want to go?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. I'll still go." And I'll never forget my first experience in Hocking Hills, walking into Old Man's Cave and looking around, and just, you guys laugh at my wows in my backpacking trip videos, but it was the wow. I was just absolutely blown away. And the thing that struck me is, I don't know why, I guess I wasn't paying attention. Why had no one shared this with me before? Why had no one told me that things like this were out there? And that was one of the big things that kind of got me into falling in love with backpacking for the first time, and recognizing that there's a much bigger world out there than just Hocking Hills or just in Ohio. And the bug kind of started from there, and it just took off. And that's why even now, when I'm out there in the outdoors and I sing or I talk about, how excited I am to get going on a trip or see the next vista, it's every time it seems like it reminds me of that Hocking Hill experience. And it's not like I'm chasing that experience every time, but I love getting that backpacker's high, or seeing that sweeping vista for the first time on a trip, that awesome epic waterfall. And so since then, that's hooked me, and that's what keeps me coming back every time. So let me know, what is your story? Why are you in backpacking? Maybe you backpack for a specific reason like me, or you started for a specific reason like me. I want to hear your story. Let me know down in the comments, all right? Thanks for watching, guys. Peace.